privilege to have our chairman with us, CM Murtuza Kachwala, sir. I would like him to invite to say a few words. Sir, please.
Thank you. So, warm good afternoon to all the participants who joined the refresher course today. And I also thank C. Anand Raichura for joining us as a coordinator. Anand bhai, thank you. And
most welcome, sir.
Extremely grateful to my dear friend and today's speaker, Sri Ashish Jaiswal. Ashish bhai, thank you very much for accepting the invitation and deciding to share your knowledge with everyone.
My pleasure, Murtuza bhai. Thank you.
So, friends, at WIRC this year, the theme is lead towards excellence, achievement, and development. And while in practice, I think people were worried that the opportunities are reducing or the revenues are going down and the cost is going up. And hence the resultant, the net profit or the amount which they save is coming down drastically. So we at WIRC this year decided, okay, like we bring about various different subjects and we do a small refresher course on them so that if members want to do practice in that area, then they can possibly start. And which is where we've designed a refresher course on cooperative, on international tax, on internal audit, and on multiple things. See, there are like multiple stages. The refresher course is like the basic. And in the basic, we want to cover all the SIAs, the standard on internal audit. And like if you see, in the first session, we had the governance framework and the internal audit standards, which was covered by Manoj Agarwal. And then we had Vineet covering the nature of assurance. And see, like once you do a process audit, procure to pay audit, there is no guarantee that there is no fraud, or there is no guarantee I am giving that like there is no excess purchase, or there is no purchase that are higher than the market price. So that means I am not giving an absolute assurance. What I am doing is I am giving a relative assurance on the basis of my sample check. It is not true and correct. I have reviewed basis of the sample, I have done the review of the documentation, the process, and I am giving my view on that. So similarly, as we move ahead one by one, we want to see like if you do an audit, why do you do? What is the objective? Then like how do you prepare a risk-based IA plan? So like we'll cover all layers of infrastructure or all layers in an internal audit this thing. Starting from an internal audit manual to a mission statement. So what is the process? How do you do an opening meeting? Template for that. X, Y, Z we want to cover in this 15 hours so that everyone takes home something and they know like what is the whole cycle of an internal auditor, the whole journey. So that is the plan. Of course, basis my knowledge of audit, see the management, there are two things. One, either we are working in an in-house internal audit department in an organization, and there like we'll have a chief audit executive with whom we'll be working, and again he expects us to be an expert when we pick up a particular process or audit, and he wants us to come up with a lot of good value adding suggestions or observations and recommendations. Similarly, if you are a firm and an organization appoints us as a firm of chartered accountant go and do the audit, they also expect a lot of value from us. Now today the important thing is understand the process which the company wanted to implement. What is the documented process? And then evaluate what is being followed. That is what we are saying, the design, verification, check, or the walkthrough of the process end to end to see like what is documented, whether that is being followed or not. And if there are gaps, we report. But the important aspect is what is documented, whether that is correct, or are there gaps in that as well? And can you suggest some more improvement? And if yes, we should give out by way of recommendation those as well. But these days, every CEO, CFO, CXO expects us to have knowledge of the same process happening in other competitor or other businesses. And hence, there is one SIA, there is one essay also, standard on auditing, standard on internal audit, on knowledge of industry. And I think knowledge of industry is becoming important. If we are doing hospitality audit, then there are different type of audit universe and audit area. The revenue will be hotel rooms. Okay. What happens if someone walks in the night and no one locks in the system and allows the guest to go and sleep? Or like when you are making a particular dish, what should go inside as a bomb? Similarly, when you talk about telecom, prepaid, postpaid, roaming, interconnect, handset, bundle offer, different type of thing. When you talk about a bank, it is different. When you talk about insurance, it is different. The manufacturing company is different. So that understanding of that particular industry is important, because that knowledge will help us. And if we do the same industry, different clients, we'll know that something is being done better by a Runwal as compared to a Lodha, or a Hiranandani as compared to a Lodha. And that is where we'll be able to add value to the client, talk sense, and give them those recommendations that you should do so and so. So one is, of course, compliances to the policy procedure, compliance with the acts and regulation. Second is the benchmarking, or what others are doing better. But one more important thing is, now every organization is looking at, are there a better way of doing in terms of bringing about efficiency and effectiveness by adopting technology or by automating a process. So I think that also we should keep an eye open. Okay, like in the process, if there are a lot of manual activity which you feel can be automated using an RPA bot or an OCR technology or X or Y, I think that also you should discuss and try to bring it out. And the recommendation could be 2 or 3. One, a quick fix which they can immediately implement, and one could be a long term which the management may decide whether they want to implement or not implement. So I think interesting area is internal audit. You keep on learning new things every day. I enjoy. Of my about 30 years career, the first 4 years of statutory audit balances with internal audit and risk consulting, and I really enjoy. So I think that passion is required, and if there is a passion, then I think we can add lots and lots of value to the client. So I would say, friends, happy learning. There are enough and more opportunities, like outside the audit, outside certification, and outside taxation. If you have knowledge of industry, if you have knowledge of processes, you can write policy procedure, you can create SOPs, you can create a risk control self-assessment, you can do an enterprise risk management, you can do internal audit, you can do internal financial control testing and design, you can do SOX testing and design. Then if a client is moving from a Tally to a Zoho or Oracle or SAP, you can help them in implementing those. You can create chart of accounts. If there are multiple systems or CRM billing system, you can see whether they're talking to each other or not, or how do you bring about efficiency. And now the last thing is, again, if there is a process, how it can be automated, and how do you bring about efficiency. So there is so much of work, there is no end to it, and every level of organization needs it. So I think in the right time, right place, lot of opportunity for everyone. And I would say, enjoy this 15-hour journey with us at WIRC. If you think, or 12-hour journey, and if you think anything that we can do differently, please do let us know. We are happy to help, happy to do it. So thank you very much. Happy learning, and over to you, Anandji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman sir, for your valuable guidance. I would like to introduce our today's faculty, Ashish Jaiswal, before you all. He is a multi-faceted professional with more than 20 years of experience in risk assessment and mitigation strategy formation and implementation, re-engineering business process to align with business objectives and leading teams to achieve their goals. He is providing the governance, risk, and compliance practice of the firm at pan-India level. He is proficient in risk assessment and mitigation, internal control setup, MIS, and cost reduction. He is a strong leader with fast decision-making abilities, with flexibility to design and implement tailor-made solutions as per business needs, beliefs, and practices, high integrity and ethics. He was previously a partner in KC Mehta and Company Vadodara, and also executive director at Sigma Panels Private Limited and Hammond Plastics and Chem Limited. Please welcome our speaker, CA Ashish Jaiswal. Over to Ashish Jaiswal, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anandji, for this.
हेलो आशीष सर हेलो फोन
नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम है, विंडो फ्रीज हो गया, एक बार फोन करो मिश्रा जी।
सर फोन
We'll request the participants, please wait, let Ashish get rejoin. I think he has some network issues.
Sorry, there was a small technical glitch. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, WRC, for inviting me for this session. Thank you, Murtuza bhai, who has been a very good friend and philosopher and guide for me always. Whenever I need him, he is always there. And Rahul bhai is not there here, but I must thank him also for having me on this panel. So friends, with this, let us begin. The basic point that I would want to make. My presentation is visible, right?
Not yet. I think you'll have to share.
No, sir. No, sir.
Not yet. Just a moment.
Yes, sir. Now visible.
Yeah. The whole idea is that, while when we look at the potentials and when we look at the scope, there is a lot of things to be done. But however, there are certain extremely basic foundation thoughts that are need to be very clear in our mind. And I must appreciate WRC for having, or ICAI for having these standards set out. And they have been very nicely made and very nicely, presented. I only feel that, there are people who do not really go through these standards, and I must appreciate the organizers who have put this as a integral part of this refresher course, wherein we would have to go through these basics, which are already there in our ICAI knowledge base. So friends, today's session would be more for objectives of internal audit and using work of an expert. These are the two topics that have been given to me. And we would also look at the interplay between the IIA standards. IIA is Institute of Internal Auditors. That's a global organization and considered to be a very authority on internal audit. And they have come out with their standards as well. And we would look at those standards, including the IPPF. I'm sure in the beginning of these sessions, you would have gone through the overall structure of internal audit and the professional practice framework that is there. So you would be looking through those as well. We would be looking at the objectives of internal audit, that is SIA 230. And we'll also try to see how SIA 2100, IIA standard 2100 is having an interaction with SIA 230. Also 2070 we would be looking at along with objectives. And then we would be looking at how to use the work of an expert in the case of internal audit. We'll have one or two case studies, and during the discussion also, my idea would be more to discuss on the practical aspects and not really read through the standards, because I guess that is how the interaction would be better. I would encourage people to note down their questions and ask at the end of the session. Even if during some point, if you have something, you may put it in the chat box. I would be looking through that also. So let us start. Key concepts. Let us look at what are the basic concepts that we would be having here. We would be looking at the objectives of internal audit and the IIA standard 2100 and 2070. Friends, these are the objectives of internal audit. As we start the session, Basically, you would have by now have understood the definition of internal audit that is there, and it is given to us in the para 3 of the framework of IA. Independent assurance, I mean, this is exactly what even Murtuza Bhai said in the beginning, provides independent assurance on the effectiveness of internal controls and risk management process to enhance governance and achieve organization's objective. That is what we understand by saying that, to add value to the organization, so that there is something that the internal auditor brings onto the table after the effort that we do. And that's how we would be looking at this sessions also. This framework also indicates how the nature of internal audit may go. Now, there are two aspects. One is that whether we look at as an assurance activity or as an advisory role, but in terms now, like, one example was given that whether we are able to do some benchmarking, whether we can tell them that what other organizations are doing and what we are doing, is there a better way of doing it, is an advisory role. And assurance is purely able to say whether the internal controls are working effectively or not. So that is an aspect. The framework has also indicated that internal audit may go beyond assurance to include the advisory role also. So these are blended assignments. Most of the time we see that these are blended assignments wherein, assurance and advisory role go hand in hand. And that's how this defining the objectives of internal audit becomes extremely important. I'm sure you would have seen that, where we have a compulsory requirement as per the Companies Act to appoint internal auditor, that is given under section 138 and rule 13.2 of the Companies Accounts rules. And in that case, I request all participants to please keep on mute. Request all participants to keep on mute, please.
अरे बिना कि हमने जून में भी एक प्रोविजन जो है बैंक वाला मंगावे लेती है हम पाए जून नहीं वाली अविनाशी जून की प्रोविजन आप भी दिले अपने में
CA Dhaval, can you please put yourself on mute, please?
आप ही से तो बनी जाए हाँ दिल्ली बना
Yeah, I guess in the background noise, I request everybody to keep themselves on mute unless you have a question or you have something to really say, ask me. Then you are free to ask this question to me. All right, let us proceed. There is in the case where it is necessary for the company to appoint an internal auditor as per section 138 of the Companies Act, the audit committee, like who would be deciding the objectives of internal audit? The audit committee or the board, in conjunction with the management and the chief internal audit, chief of IA, that is we call as CIA, that is chief of internal audit, is expected to formulate the objectives of internal audit. So basically, audit committee or the board must say, certainly they have a discussion with chief of internal audit to decide what should be the objectives of internal audit. In case where the organizations are not covered by Rule 13.2, those who appoint the internal auditors must define the objectives. Just a moment. Sorry. Sorry. So organizations are not covered by Rule 13.2. These could be private limited companies with less than 200 crore turnover or do not have a necessity of having a compulsory need of appointing an internal auditor. Then who would be deciding the objectives of internal audit? It's very simple. People who actually appoint us, means the promoters, managing director, owners, trustee, board, they would be deciding what should be the objectives of internal audit. Again, internal audit is, there is no such mandate given either in the Companies Act or in the standards as to that these must be the objectives of the internal audit, and therefore it is left to the board, audit committee, or the promoter director, as the case may be, to define the objectives of internal audit. And these internal audit may vary widely and depend on the size, structure, and complexity of the entity. So obviously, what do we need as an outcome of an internal audit could be an aspect here. Certainly, this SIA would guide us to decide as to what should be the objectives, but broadly, these are dependent upon the size, structure, and complexity of the entity for which you are conducting the internal audit. There could also be laws and regulations and specific requirement of management that you would work on the objectives as well. So why do we need objectives? Can't we do the internal audit without objectives? Many a times it has happened that the audit team doesn't even read the engagement letter or the internal audit charter, and once they just ask us that, sir, what is the scope, and we would start the audit. And I say, but what are you trying to look at? And they have no answer. So audit team must always be careful as to what is the objective of internal audit, and that helps them decide the functioning of IA activity. Even if you are an outsourced IA activity, we will come when we will look at the IIA standards. IIA has a slightly different approach towards outsource activity and in-house internal audit. They have a specific standard for outsourced internal audit. But for our SIAs, they are in conjunction with each other, and they talk on both the in-house internal audit as well as outsourced internal audit. So therefore, before you even start preparing a plan, before you start looking at how the internal audit activity would be functioning, you must understand the objectives. And therefore, defining the objectives is necessary. That's how you will form the IA activity and look at the functioning. Your team members, etc., would be only on the basis of what objectives you want to really achieve. These objectives would give clarity to auditors and stakeholders also. So many a times the auditors are very clear in their own mind, but the stakeholders have very different expectations. And the objectives are the only place where you can align what expectations the stakeholders have and what expectations or what the performance of auditors would be. So that is objectives are bringing both to a common platform, and so that they both expect the same, and accordingly internal auditors perform as per the objectives. The second point is also that is linkage between expectations and how it can be met with the IA framework, and better area of key operational areas like roles and responsibilities. So sometimes there is a question that if there is a mistake or there is a mistake in the accounting, is the internal auditor responsible? So you'll have to refer back to the IA objectives. Is the objective stating that you have to conform to the balance sheet P&L or look at the accounting correctness of the accounting? If it is an objective, then maybe you could be responsible. But many a times, if the objective is giving an overall assurance on the internal control activities, then if there is a mistake in accounting or a wrong presentation or a disclosure not done in the financials, internal auditor may not be responsible. Similarly, accountability and also authority. These are the aspects which are taken from the objectives. So where do you find these objectives? So, as I say this, that your audit team must always read the objectives. Where do we find this? So you would have seen in the framework of internal audit that you need to prepare an internal audit charter. This is primarily for in-house audit team and the stakeholders, that is for in-house team of internal auditors and stakeholders. We prepare an internal audit charter. This defines the objectives. This also tells us the roles, responsibilities, how the audit will be conducted, the authority, responsibility, etc. is all clearly mentioned in the internal audit charter. We'll quickly have a look later in the next slides as to how an internal charter would look like. Or you look at an engagement letter. This is a formal engagement letter, agreement signed with the outsourced internal audit service provider. So wherever, like, I'm from a firm and we do internal audits for other organizations. So engagement letter is the most important document. We call it EL, or we may call it an appointment letter. it's a most important document which guides the entire internal audit activity. And the most important point which is written there is the objectives of internal audit. What is the management or what is the board expecting us to perform? Management letter becomes a very important document to look at the objectives when you are doing an outsourced internal audit. Certain cases, yes, both the documents may exist. Well, read both of them in that case. If there are two documents, you will have to read both of them. The duty of the CIA, the last line is that, is to have the, it must have this internal audit charter clearly available or documented. While it is the duty of the CIA to get this internal audit charter in place, the board has to approve this internal audit charter, or the audit committee would have to approve this audit charter. So CIA has to write this down, but it has to be approved by the board. So do remember this, that internal audit charter has to be written by the chief of internal auditor, and it has to be approved by the board or by the audit committee. Likewise, if you are an outsourced internal audit service provider, you will be writing an engagement letter based on the discussions that you would have had with the management. And finally, the board or the management or the person who's appointing you would be approving this engagement letter. So remember that. So we'll quickly have a look. The SIA provides us with an indicative list of objectives that you must be having. Also in Standard on Auditing SF 610, it is mentioned that what could be the IA objectives. But let me tell you, these are indicative. There is a word in the beginning, these are indicative list. So this is something that you will have to evolve as you would move in your discussions with the board and the those who are charged with governance. What you would be discussing with them, what are their expectations, what are the situations in the company, what you would want to really achieve, and basis that you would be writing down these objectives. Certainly monitor internal controls is a basic objective of internal audit, that whether internal controls are working properly. So review controls, monitor their operations and recommend improvements thereto. Examine financial and operating information. So here we may not be actually doing a trial balance audit, but certainly how accounting happens, how the information flows into the accounts may be taken up as an objective, the review of that. Review operating activities. So review the economy, efficiency and effectiveness of operating activities, which could be procurement, which could be HR, which could be sales, which could be safety, which could be production planning and control, which could be information technology, general controls. These are all operating activities of the organization. They could be non-financial activities of an entity, but they are also part of the objective. So review of operating activities would also be part of the objectives. Statutory compliances is certainly, nowadays most of the companies are saying that they want to be 100% compliant, and therefore it becomes the responsibility of the internal auditor to see whether the compliance process of the organization is adequate or not. So that could be one of the objectives. Risk management, integral part of internal audit, how your risks are identified, how they are evaluated, how they are mitigated, and what is the risk that you are accepting is a very important part of the objectives of internal audit. Governance. So assess the governance process, whether the organization's ethics and values are being met or not, whether there is an adequate communication in case if there is some issues that are coming up, how the management of the day-to-day routine management happens, what is the delegation of authority, what is the segregation of duties, how these are managed or how these are inbuilt in the systems are all part of governance. How things are being done, that is part of governance. So these are the indicative objectives that are defined in the SIA. As we just discussed, internal audit charter So what could be the points that are important in the internal audit charter? We have just quickly mentioned this. I'm not going into too much of detail into internal audit charter because that's a separate topic altogether. Today we are focusing more on the objectives of internal audit. So internal audit charter would contain what all things? So it would contain, so basically it's a defines IA objectives and other important aspects of how IA activity will be functioning. It also clarifies how IA is to be undertaken, what is auditor's responsibility, also what is auditor's authority. Everything is mentioned in the internal audit charter. So basic, say, components of the IA charter could be the mission and vision of the internal audit function, purpose and objectives of internal audit, reporting structure. This is also very important. We don't know to whom to send the report, and many a times I have seen auditors simply sending the report to the CFO and not marking copy to the managing director also. And later on, the MD says that I don't know what you guys are doing. It's such a basic point that, you know, in the audit charter or in the engagement letter, a circulation list has to be mentioned. Now, such basic things get missed out. And the reason why it is missed out, because the audit team did not read the internal audit charter or did not read the appointment letter or the engagement letter. Many a times, I must also say that, you know, being in practice for such a long time now, many a times as auditors, we also miss out on writing these basic aspects in the engagement letter, that what would be the circulation list of these reports, to whom these reports would be given. So that is why it is important. Independence, how you must always mention about your independence in the audit report. Scope and approach, you would have a very detailed session on the audit scope and audit universe and how the scoping is to be done. Accountability, authority, roles, responsibilities, quality assurance and conformance with SIAs. These are all aspects that are part of the internal audit charter. So in an engagement letter, what happens? So practically the same things that you saw in the internal audit charter would appear in the engagement letter also. So which means that, you know, engagement letter would also provide how the audit would be conducted. What are the objectives? It would also be signed by the engagement partner, because here engagement partner becomes the CIA, that is the chief of internal audit, and the appointing authority of the company. So they both have to come to an agreement that this is how the audit would be conducted. Again, the same aspects. If you look at the previous slide and this slide, majority of the things you will find would be similar. Only one point added here is the last 2 points: compensation, ownership of working papers, and termination of agreement. Because there we are talking about an in-house team, where we are not talking about compensation in the internal audit charter. They are basically employees of the organization. But when we are as an external service provider, you will mention compensation, or ownership of working papers, and termination of the arrangement. So these are certain aspects which are additional over and above this. Otherwise, most of the things, objectives of IA, independence, objectivity, scope, approach, accountability, roles, limitation, and confidentiality, everything is part of the charter also, and the engagement letter also. So friends, this was about the SIA on the objectives. I would just take a quick 2 minutes time here and see whether if there are any questions on this much, or these slides that we have gone through. If there are any questions, I would be, you know, happy to take them before we move further. No worries. If you have no questions, you can, or if you have some questions, you can ask me later as well. Friends, I am sure you would have looked at International Professional Practices Framework that is given by IIA, and there are certain mandatory guidance and certain implementation. These are recommended guidance that are there. Our SIAs are recommendatory in nature, but the IPPF has certain factors which are, or certain aspects which are mandatory, and certain which are in recommendatory nature. So the standards that we are going to look at and the implementation guidance, how to implement that is recommendatory in nature, because the standards is what they are expecting people to follow, but how to follow is something that is left on to the auditors, left on to the users of this IPPF to really decide upon. However, they have given a very clear recommendation with regard to what is expected when you look at any of the standards in IPPF. So certainly core principles, code of ethics, definitions and standards, these are mandatory. These are applicable across to everybody who do internal audit, regardless of whether you are an IIA member or not. So that's what they say. How they would be monitoring and implementing it is a separate question, but that's what anyone who does internal audit, these IPPF would be applicable to them. So we will look at the IIA 2100, that is nature of work, and we will see as to what could be the interplay between the activities that or the objectives and the aspects that are covered under the SIA 240 and the IIA standard 2100. So 2100 is about nature of work. Certainly this is talking about the internal audit and the nature of work of internal audit. So they have explained that internal audit must evaluate and contribute to the improvement of the organization's governance. So certainly there is an assurance that is there. To evaluate means that whether it is working appropriately or not, but there is a stress that it should contribute to the improvement of the organization. How to do it? By using a systematic discipline and a risk-based approach. So IIA standards have always been talking about the risk-based approach in internal audit. In the opening statement, Murtuza Bhai also mentioned about the risk-based internal audit and how that is to be done. IIA standards talk about risk-based internal audit in all the standards that they have put in. So they've always said that, we must evaluate and see which are the areas which need more attention, and accordingly focus on those while doing your internal audits. So internal audit credibility and value are enhanced when the auditors are proactive and their evaluations offer new insights and consider future impact. So this is the standard that they have mentioned, and the further points from this paragraph, next paragraph onwards, are the implementation guide as to how to do this. So how to do this is confirming with standard 2100. You will have to have a thorough understanding of the concepts of governance, risk management and control. And you must go through the entire IPPF. So international standards for professional practice of internal auditing, as well as standards that apply specifically to governance, risk management and control. So understanding that is necessary to ensure that, what nature of work internal audit would do would be conforming to the standards 2100. Certain responsibilities are cast on the CAE. So just a differentiation between SIA and IIA standards is that, SIA talks about Chief of Internal Audit, that is CIA, but IIA standards will talk on CAE, that is Chief Audit. So that's a difference. There's an American language, and sometimes there is some understanding issue when we look at an American language. The way it is mentioned is a little different. If you have downloaded the IIA standards and you would go through it, there would be a lot of issues, like we read certain things in a different manner, they read it in a very different manner. So I have tried to simplify it so that, when you go through, after you have gone through these discussions, and now if you read the IIA standard, you will have much better clarity and understanding. So CAE, again, if you remember, in the SIA also, it was mentioned that the CIA must discuss with the board, it must discuss with the stakeholders and people charged with governance as to how the objectives, what should be the role responsibilities, how the internal audit charter would be written down. Here also it is the same thing. So basically both are talking on the same lines. Only thing is that, we are talking at a global standard level, IIA, and SIAs are issued by Institute of Chartered Accountants. So again, here also they use the same document in the internal audit charter, any expectations. So same thing like what we have seen there. Here in the next paragraph, they have explained that, you must look at the maturity of governance. This is the risk-based internal audit that they have added, which was not there when we look at the objectives of in SIA. You must look at the three processes: governance process, risk management process, and control process, as well as the organization's culture, seniority of individuals who are there, how old the organization is, how mature the people around there are. The CI must assess the risk associated with these three processes. They have mentioned that you can use a COSO model or King report on corporate governance to evaluate or to assess. That's how you would be doing it. This is what is explained in the IIA standard. And document and discuss with senior management any relevant observations and conclusions. CA also marks recommendations. So as you will progress in the audit, you will also be mentioning your recommendations for the process, etc. of this. The interplay that I see over here is that, the SIA also mentions that you must document all this in the IA charter, and the IIA also mentions. And from this, the objectives would be drawn out. While 2100 doesn't specifically mention that what could be the objectives, but it gives a very clear indication that the IA charter will be the governing document, and IA charter would contain the objectives of the internal audit. So what documents you need to evidence conformance is that internal audit charter with roles, responsibilities related to governance, risk management and control, internal audit plan, the documented internal audit plan, which has to be discussed with the CAE, board and the senior management, and engagement plans to demonstrate that internal audits activities are disciplined, systematic and risk-based approach. As I said in the beginning, in case of all IIA standards, you will see this risk-based approach. So which means that, IIA standards always talk about that first evaluate the processes, identify which areas are necessary, where you need to focus more, where the risk is high, or where you feel that, in future the risk would be higher. Accordingly, design the internal audit procedures to cover the, the areas or the scopes in that case. Eventually, what is the value added results is what is going to be relevant in the internal audit. So friends, as I was telling in the beginning, internal audit SIAs, that is the SIA 240, doesn't really mention about that what happens if there is an outsourced internal auditor and there is an in-house internal auditor. It talks jointly about that who has to, what will happen if there is an in-house, so you will work on a charter. If there is an outsource, you will have an. But Institute of Internal Auditors has a specific standard 2070, that is 2070, that is external service provider for IA. That is very specifically mentioned that, when there is an external service provider, they have a complete standard on it, and there is a very detailed, elaborate implementation guide for the IIA standard that, when there is an external service provider, these are the aspects that you must be taking care of. So number one, when there is an external service provider, who would be responsible for maintaining an effective internal audit activity? Because this fellow is an outsider, so that responsibility is cast onto the organization itself. When you talk of organization, it is the board, it is the management, or people who are charged with governance. It is their responsibility to ensure that an effective internal audit activity is being done. And how that is being done? That is done by the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program. So while IIA standards have specifically mentioned that, there has to be if there is an external service provider, then there has to be a very specific Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, QAIP, That must be there. External service provider must understand the 1300 series of standards and should make the organization aware of its responsibility for maintaining a quality assurance and improvement program. That covers all the aspects of internal audit activity. So in QA/IP, you have to cover all the aspects of internal audit, and it covers the internal audit operations and management. It is like a peer review. You may want to compare it with a peer review that we have. That will be a check on the internal auditor whether he has done the audit correctly or not, whether the scope was defined correctly or not, whether the audit procedures were adequate or not, sample selection was done properly or not, whether the audit procedures and the findings were appropriately discussed with the people and an action plan was drawn out or not. So QA/IP has a very elaborate way of reviewing, and it is said that at least once in 5 years it must be reviewed. If the results are adverse, then you must review it in at least once in 3 years or once in 2 years. So that's how QA/IP has to be taken care when there is a external service provider for internal audit. So again, here this with regard to the implementation, the guide says that the organization has the responsibility for maintaining an effective internal audit activity. So later on, you cannot say, okay, I had given it to somebody and he did not work properly, so I am not accountable when it comes to the some issues to the stakeholders. No, it is not possible. You will not be able to say that. An organization must maintain that responsibility for ensuring that IA activity performs its responsibility effectively and efficiently. So this is something which is very critical and important, that the board or the management will be responsible for the proper functioning of the internal audit activity. So how does this work? So number one, there has to be an engagement letter between the organization and the external service provider. So, while so much of responsibility is cast on the organization, how will that be able to work? How the people charged with governance will be able to really do this? And that would be that specific service provider specifies this responsibility and deliverables related to the QA/IP. So engagement letter would be defining this. External service hired to serve should be, also meet the outsourced internal auditor, should also meet the senior management and the board to discuss that how the QA/IP will work, what would be the organization's responsibility and nature and requirements that would be there. So this is something which is critical for an external auditor or external service provider. He has to be very careful about the QA/IP. Even the organization must ensure that whatever internal audit does conforms to the standards and conforms to the QA/IP results as well. So that was all from my side with regard to the first section that we have to cover today. Any questions so far? I would be happy. I think there are 2 questions that are whether it is recommendatory to share internal audit report to the statutory auditor. Kamlesh, that's a very interesting question. So let me take this before we move further. So internal audit report, you have to issue to the management. You have to, so suppose if there is an audit committee and it's compulsory for you to have an internal auditor would report to the audit committee or the chairman of the audit committee, so to say. So the internal auditor per se is never required to share the report with the statutory auditor. It is for the management to share that report to the statutory auditor. So internal auditor would as per the circulation list, they might issue to the managing director or to the chairman of the audit committee, and in turn, they would circulate it to the statutory auditor. If you ask me, it is recommendatory to share internal audit. So I would say no, it is not recommended to share internal audit report to the statutory auditor unless the management has asked you specifically to share that report to the statutory auditor. So it is always better you share the report or you issue the report to the management and then let them decide whether to share it to the statutory auditor or not, or what they have to do with it. Certainly statutory auditor can always ask for this report and he will ask for it, but the MD would share that report with the statutory auditor. So that was my take on the first question. The second question Jitendra Bhai has asked, whether the objectives of IA should be changed every quarter or year. Can it be amended during the year considering circumstances? Again, a very interesting question. See, objectives are in a way where I say that, I would want to review the internal controls. I would want to have the compliances in place, to review the compliances, whether they are there or not. So objectives are usually a very long-term objective that is being set as to what the internal audit activity would be delivering. Would say is that what could change is the scope that you will cover in the year. So objectives would help you to define the audit universe, would help you to define the scope, and that you may look at for changing every year or every once in 2 years or something like that. Every quarter is too fast for changing objectives of IA. What type of circumstances would lead to amendments to the audit scope is something very drastic, like we had COVID coming up. So COVID may have an impact wherein the entire operations got disrupted, may have an impact on the objectives for a temporary phase that we might have to relook at the objectives. There is a major takeover of the organization, or a major component of the organization has got sold off or hived off. In that cases, you might have to look at changing during the year. But otherwise, objectives are for a long term. Normally, we do not see many changes coming in the objectives. But yes, scope, yes. When you have a scope defined, there might be a lot of changes in the scope that you might be looking at. So I hope I have answered both the questions appropriately. If there is something more that you want me to take up, can type again, or I hope I have answered the question. Even a small yes from your side would be good for me to understand whether I have been able to address it appropriately or not. All right, so let us move to a case study that I just have made for how would we look at designing an objective for this. So I would want you to read as I would change or I would keep on adding. So certainly, if you look at this, 400 crore ka turnover means that it will have a compulsory internal auditor. Although it's a private limited company, it's not a listed entity. Yet still, since it has got a 400 crore turnover, it will be compulsory for you to have an internal audit. Multi-locational presence. Again, this also you will have to be very careful in designing. So these are the inputs that you are getting when you are discussing with the management that, what about your how the company is structured, how they are working. Few of the functions, HR, corporate finance, are centralized at plant function heads report to the respective HODs at the corporate office. So this is how the organization is structured. Other functions like marketing, sales are decentralized. So there are certain which are centralized, certain which are decentralized. Again, everybody reports to the CEO, that is corporate office. They have come to you and they have asked you you become the internal auditor. So it starts with, so you obviously would be very happy to have such a company for which you would be doing internal audit. So the first point comes is that what should be the IA objectives for this company? I have one more question, but I will take that after we finish this case study. Any thoughts on this case study? Anybody would want to, mention something? What could be the critical aspects of this this case study? So certainly, multi-locational presence in different parts of the state will have an impact on your objectives. The aspect that there is a certain functions are decentralized, certain functions are centralized, will also have an aspect on your objectives. Right? Are you all getting me that these are the aspects that will have an impact on the objectives? So let us see what could be the possible objectives. Certainly monitor internal controls, but what type of controls? See, you have lot of geographical spread, and therefore manual controls would be, system-based controls would be better. And certainly the answer is that system-based controls would be better. So, when you look at monitoring internal controls, you must also look at that whether the system-based controls are adequately in place or not, whether they are being reviewed time to time or not. So internal audit must have a review mechanism for internal controls in place. Operating activities, we have seen that certain basic activities are decentralized, certain activities are centralized. So in that case, there is a very great need to review the operating activities with regard to the efficiency and controls. कोई एक प्लांट कहीं हिमाचल में होगा, कोई एक प्लांट कहीं साउथ में होगा, कोई एक प्लांट कहीं ओडिशा में लगाया होगा. अभी हाउ डू यू सी कि वहां पे सब जगह एफिशिएंसी एंड कंट्रोल्स कैसे चल रहा है? So that becomes an objective of internal audit to give an assurance to the board that the operating activities have adequate efficiency and controls in place. Statutory compliances, no questions about it. Every state has a different compliance framework. Certain compliances are on a national level. Compliances as a very important aspect. Risk management processes, these are all the very basic standard objectives that you would be putting up. But as the need of the organization looks at, there would be a blend of assurance activity as well as a consulting activity. And therefore, in the objectives, you would want to have certain aspects which would be taking care of the consulting activity also, which would be specific to the management requirements. Safeguarding of assets, whether they are physical, data, information. So physical assets are inventory, fixed assets, these are physical assets, cash, etc. are physical assets. Data information are, in the digital form. So digital assets are also there for which you need to have safeguarding. These could be the objectives. In case of governance process, this could be a blend wherein, we try to see the consulting activity, whether the SOP is correctly drafted for all the locations, whether it is uniform and whether it is implemented across all locations in the uniform manner or not, is also an objective for internal audit. MIS is Management Information System. So, when there are multiple locations, how does the report comes to the corporate office? You have seen that all of them report to the corporate office. And therefore, when you see the reports coming from corporate office, it becomes a very difficult aspect. Yes, Rajesh Singh has mentioned multi-location aspect. Yes, I agree. Multiple processes. Yes, I agree. Delegation of authorities and responsibilities, that is part of the SOP and the governance process that Rajesh has mentioned. Very nice. Labor laws and compliances, very important. This would be part of the statutory compliances that we have mentioned here. But yes, very rightly mentioned, Rajesh. These are the critical aspects that are there, which are part of the objectives. Again, in governance, ERP would play a very important role, and therefore the critical aspect would be that the ERP covers all the locations in the right manner, the delegation and the ERP, the access rights, etc. in the ERP is adequately done. So that would be this. These are again possible objectives. Certainly, this is a case study, and therefore, it becomes everything cannot be put up here. But I would agree that most of you have been able to get this. Any questions on this before we move ahead? So Rajesh has also asked a question: to ensure the quality of internal audit, how much of the projects out of 100 running projects should be covered to be fair? All projects are 200 crores each. Now, technically, this is not the part of the objectives area. See, objectives would be something like this, that I would want to have an adequate control on the internal, or the internal control would be adequate. I would have to ensure that a risk management process is in place. These are the objectives. But this is more of which all projects you would want to cover in the audit scope. So this is more from a scope related aspect. But I would say it is very difficult to answer this only on the basis of turnover, because if all the projects are 200 crores each, we'll have to evaluate the projects as to what is the risk management process, what are the controls that are already put in place. And here, yes, I would say that the risk-based approach would be necessary for us to identify. Suppose, for example, the projects are, of course, these would be geographically spread out projects. And if you'll see that, there are certain projects which are running in a very far or a remote area, maybe you may want to select one or two from those areas. You may want to see that, what all other projects, how they are spread, what is the size and what is the stage at which the projects are. You may not want to select too many projects which are at a closure stage. You may want to select as a spread of new projects which are partially completed, projects which are at the closure, projects which are already closed. So that is how the internal audit must select the sample or the scope that you will have to take. But genuinely a concern here. However, a lot more analysis would be required before you will be able to decide that, whether selecting 10 projects is fair or whether selecting 20 projects. Better that you also have a discussion with the people charged with the governance to see that, how to have this coverage. Right, so let us move ahead. We just have enough time to complete this. My time allotted is till 4:30, so I'm sure we would complete within time. Just a quick feedback, if few people can write in the chat box, whether, or in the question answer or in the chat box, wherever, that whether, we are able to understand the concepts correctly. We are, how are we, is it going in the right pace, or you need some more detailing to be done? One or two participants, if you can quickly write down in the chat box a quick feedback while the session is on, that would be great for me. So while you do that, let me go ahead and look at the second SIA 240, that is using work of an expert. And with this, we will talk about the IIA Standard 2050, which talks about coordination and reliance. So this second section of my today's discussion would be on this. Thank you, Jagmohan and Bharat, for your feedback. That encourages me. Thank you. So when you say expert, you would have heard this word a lot of times, that, wo expert hai isme, wo expert hai usme, and, people think that we are also expert in a lot of things. Normally, it is my experience, at least, although I never have practiced too much in tax, but people feel that, we are expert in tax. So they will come up and straight away in the, sometimes at 10 o'clock in the night, they will say, ki bhai, maine ye makan becha hai, और उसमें ये कैपिटल गेन आ रहा है, तो तुम्हारे हिसाब से क्या होना चाहिए? So it becomes such a big challenge that to answer such a question, that one that you might not be working in taxation department itself, and you have to answer such a question, and then if you say कि मैं देखता हूँ तो कह रहे यार तुम तो expert हो, तुम तो फटाफट गिनती करके बता सकते हो. So I said it is not so easy to calculate something. So this also explains that who is an expert. So when you have a specific skill or unique knowledge, you are in possession of certain special skills or unique knowledge, or you have years of experience and expertise in a particular area, field, or discipline, you are considered as an expert. So a person or an entity, sometimes you would see that that firm is expert in taxation, or that firm is expert in forensic, that firm is expert in internal audits. So, how do you look at it? That the entire team has got this specific knowledge. They have worked hard on this, or they have worked number of years. So they have a lot of experience, and they have developed an expertise in this specific field. So that is being defined as an expert. When would a chief internal auditor may need an expert? So certainly for internal audit, we are considered as experts. So then this SIA doesn't talk about chartered accountants doing internal audit as an expert. So no, this is other than us that we are talking about. Say for example, that you're talking of an IT expert. So sometimes where you have to do an audit of a call center where everybody has a lot of computers and there is a lot of data that is getting exchanged there, then you might need an IT expert, which you might not be. An internal auditor may not be an IT expert. He may not possess enough knowledge to conduct an IT audit. So therefore, he might look for an expert. Say for example, just for an example right now, what question was asked that by Rajesh, that if there are so many projects, how do I do the audit? If they are civil projects, you might yourself not be an expert in civil engineering. So you might need a civil expert, electrical, mechanical engineering, etc. We should have a unique and specialized discipline. So it is not enough that you say, okay, I have always stood when my house was being constructed, I was always standing there, and now I have become an expert in civil engineering. No, that is not possible. You must have a degree. You must have actually worked under these projects, and as a specific skill and unique knowledge you must possess. Certain specialized disciplines like actuarial services, we have all been using actuarial services, forensics, taxation, treasury operations, etc., would be considered as expert. And sometimes the CIA may need assistance for an audit from an expert also. So this SIA explains that how to use the work of an expert, how to rely on that work. Generally, these experts are appointed as part of the internal audit assignment. That is part of the internal audit assignment, where this skill set is not available within the IA team or function. You would be either aware that many CA firms have hired civil engineers in their team. Even I have worked with civil engineers, and I have worked with mechanical engineers as part of my team, where we have done certain assignments which were very specific to the technical requirements of the client. So it happens, but they are part of my team. So when they are already part of my team, I don't need an outside expert. They are in any case part of my team. But when I don't have a team, I might have to call for an outsider. The best example is PMC. When you look at any project, you would have a PMC. You know what is a PMC? It's project management consultant. So what does he do? He actually works as a pre-auditor for all the invoices that come, for all the design approvals, the timelines, the time overruns, the cost overruns, and he actually confirms the measurements, etc., before the invoices are being booked. So these are sometimes outsourced, and sometimes part of the team. This can be an employee of the company, much like but what happens is that if you are taking as an employee, his independence may be, you must evaluate his independence and objectivity, because if he's reporting to somebody, then, his independence may get affected when he participates in the internal audit also. An external service provider with expertise in accounting. So we all are not considered as expert for this standard. So only for this standard, we are not considered as an expert. Otherwise, certainly we are experts in our fields. So why do we need an expert? So it's as very basic, where I have been given, say, for example, in my auditee company, there is a major capital expansion going on, and civil construction was a critical component in the expansion. So they have practically added a new factory, and the factory was being constructed. And for that, the audit committee or the board wanted the internal auditors to review whether the civil capitalizations or the project for this construction has been done correctly or not. And for that, you would say कि भाई वो मैं bill check कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन उसका measurement मेरे को लेना नहीं आएगा. We cannot do that. Whether the right material was used, whether the design was appropriate or not, that we cannot do. So in that case, you may want to have a specific knowledge and expertise in the IAT, which you don't have. In that case, we may want to have another expert in this. Otherwise, what happens is that, your IA work may not be reliable. The credibility of the IA work goes away. And the quality standards for internal audit we will not be able to meet. So what happens is that in that case, we have an expert and we have to rely on the technical work completed. And that is why this standard was brought in, as to how the internal auditor would rely on the work of the expert. So internal auditor will have to make an independent determination of using the work of an expert based on technical and complexity of the subject matter of IA. So, whether it is complex, whether it is technically required or not, so that judgment internal auditor will have to make. The risk assessment, materiality, and importance of the subject matter. So again, you will have to assess that if you don't have an expert, what is the risk? So many a times the internal audit also runs a risk of not able to complete the scope adequately or not able to give due importance to the scope. And that is where we have to also see that, if I don't have the technical competence, I must not attempt to do that audit itself in the first place. Unless I have that, I bring that expertise within the team. So risk assessment, materiality, and importance of the subject matter. If it is very critical, suppose the capitalization, there were minor repair works, which are, say, for example, in a total asset block of 100 crore, that was only 5 lakhs of rupees. Then you may say it is not important, it is not material of 100 crore asset block. If I'm talking of 5 lakhs of rupees, it is not material. And therefore, I may not need an expert to review this. But if you're talking of 20 crore asset capitalization, then yes, you might look at it that, oh, this is an important aspect. Materiality wise also it is high. And therefore, you may want to have an expert on the board. Certainly, you have to look at your own audit team, quality of audit with the expertise, etc., to see that whether an expert is required or not. So, who will appoint an expert? Is always a question. The answer is given in the SIA. Internal auditor shall have the authority to select, appoint, and engage the expert. But sometimes it may happen that the management says that nahi, hum aapko dete ek expert, aap uske sath ye kaam karo. So then obviously internal auditor feels that if I am not able to evaluate and appoint an expert, then whether his independence and objectivity of the expert will be maintained or not. So in case where the authority rests with the management, then internal auditor ka ek kaam badh jata hai. He has to conduct procedures to validate the independence and objectivity of the expert. So this is an additional role that internal auditor will have to play, that to ensure that he is independent and his objectivity is being maintained. So how do you check his independence and objectivity? Because you fear that if somebody else appoints an expert, वो उसको क्या बोलता है, वो उसको क्या objectives देता है, वो उसे क्या समझा के काम करने भेज रहा है, उससे आपका काम पे इफेक्ट पड़ सकता है. And therefore you may fear that outcome of the expert's work may be influenced by such authority. So if somebody else, so he will say कि मुझे भी बताओ क्या outcome में आ रहा है, then he might, because see, in any case everyone now knows that internal auditor को पता नहीं चलता है, he is not having that expert knowledge about this, so they may want to tweak the report to ensure that no major observations are there. That is the fear that the auditor should have, and therefore objectivity, he may get influenced by such authority. If the company or an external service provider, in that case an external professional would not be influenced, is what a basic assumption is, because an external person would be more objective. He is not accountable to the company itself. He is not drawing salary from the company, so obviously he would be more say independent with regard to his views and opinions, as compared to an expert who is employee of the company. And then the relationship of the expert, where any relationship with the company is, in any case, the objectivity of the expert may get compromised. So if there is any relationship with the company management, especially with those who have some role in the IA assignment, may get compromised. So these are the aspects that one has to be very careful when you are actually hiring a expert. That too, when the management is hiring an expert for you. Personal interest. So there are many people you would have seen कि वो आपके साथ आते हैं, IT वाले खास, वो आके वहाँ पे अपना ही मार्केटिंग करना चालू कर देते हैं. तो आपको लगता है अरे भाई तुम पर्सनल इंटरेस्ट या ऑडिट करने आए हो, तुम अपना मार्केटिंग कर रहे हो. So ये चीजें कभी-कभी देखने मिलती है, and it is having an impact on the objectivity and independence of the auditor, and then it becomes very difficult for the auditor to give an unbiased report or an impartial report. So these are the challenges that one has to be very careful in the appointment of an internal auditor. When you hire an expert, you must go through the credentials and qualifications of the expert also. So you must carry out an independent evaluation of the qualifications and credentials of the expert. Meaning thereby, you might have to look at what, so suppose if he's a civil engineer and if he has a MBA as a qualification and he comes as a civil expert, then you might doubt his expertise. You might say that, no, I would rather prefer to have a civil engineer as an expert rather than a management graduate who claims that he is a civil engineer or who claims that he is an expert. So educational and professional qualifications, membership of professional bodies are the ways to evaluate the credentials. Background and reference check, reputation of the expert, past assignment experiences. These would be certain aspects as to how you evaluate the credentials of an expert. So now, whether the expert is appointed by us, whether the auditors, or whether the expert is appointed by the company, this is how the auditor is expected to evaluate the qualifications and credentials of the expert. So findings of an expert, now the expert has conducted the audit and he has come up with certain findings. So the internal auditor should also defining the scope. So what happens is that internal auditor cannot let him go by himself and say कि तुम जाओ करके आ जाओ कुछ भी और report देना, मैं नीचे उसको append कर दूंगा. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है. That is not permissible. Internal auditor must participate in defining the scope, approach and work to be conducted by the expert. And unless he doesn't do this, you cannot incorporate that report in the in your IA report. So because then you have no idea. Now, let me tell you, whatever happens, the responsibility of the report remains with the internal auditor. Even if you have hired an expert, so you must evaluate his work and you must also help in defining or participate in scope defining approach and work to be conducted by the expert. How to do that? So define audit objective procedures, identify subject matter to be reviewed, what is to be included, what is not to be included, specific requirement or limitations of the work to be undertaken, information required by the expert, nature and reliability of the original data to be used. All of this, the internal auditor must also review. These are the indicative list, but then depends on what technical work you have carried out, who is the expert, and what is the credential of the expert that you would get involved to that level. Continuing that point, any assumptions that need to be incorporated as part of the exercise, extent of access, confidentiality of information, working papers, are all the aspects that, so ownership again comes back to the internal auditor. The expert cannot say, "मैं इसका कोई backup working आपको दूंगा नहीं." That the internal auditor must keep. He must study those papers and ensure that he has understood what the work the expert has done and how he has arrived at any conclusions. So that is very important. Confidentiality of information. Now the expert must also sign an NDA with us and with the company if required. When you have a confidentiality issue, you should ensure that there is whenever you have an engagement letter with the expert, that also should have a confidentiality clause. If required, you may have a separate NDA. NDA is non-disclose agreement. So internal auditor is supposed to perform an evaluation during and after the completion of the work. So not only at the end, but during the audit also. So mid-reviews are also important. So first you have participated in the scope definition, in objective, in how the audit procedure would be done, planning work. At that time you have to get involved. During the audit, how it is being done, that you must review. And after completion of the work, also there should be an evaluation by the internal auditor. This is required to determine the quality of the work performed and ensure that reliability of findings is there. So that, whenever later on, if there is a review or if there is a question coming up to the internal auditor, he must be able to answer that question. This is the same aspect that we just discussed. These are the explanatory points. So you have to do a detailed review, be thorough with the procedures, thoroughness of the procedures that has been done. If there are scope limitations, you mentioned that. Working papers, you have to understand the basis of significant observations. So auditor must understand, even if it's a technical matter, auditor must apply his mind and try to understand as to how this has been arrived at. Harmony and similarity of findings with the rest of the IA report. So it should not happen that, your IA report says that purchase cost and consumptions are going up as compared to the sales. And the expert is saying that, consumption per unit is reduced drastically. So they are extremely opposite findings. And in the same report, I can't have two such points. One saying that purchase cost and the, is going up as compared to the sales, and the consumption is going up as per financials, and the consumption per unit as per the expert is going down. So that cannot happen. There has to be similarity in the report. If there is an inconsistency, again, internal auditor must attempt to resolve it, conduct additional procedures, or engage another expert to resolve inconsistency. So see, friends, all the responsibility when you have an expert is on the internal auditor. So you will have to actually participate with the expert in doing the audit. You cannot leave the expert that आप जाइए audit करके आइए, जो भी report आएगा हम लगा देंगे. तो वो आपका gross negligence में आ सकता है. So again, these are the same points, like, what documentation are required. So basically all these aspects, scope, approach, working papers, what evaluations we have done, what discussions have happened, all that needs to be documented. So friends, here when we look at the IIA standard on the on reliance of the work done by the other person, coordination and reliance of work done by the others, it is very much in line with the SIA. So basically, what it says is that work of other internal and external assurance consulting service providers to ensure proper coverage and minimize duplication of efforts. In that case, the responsibility remains with the CAE, and he has to ensure that the other service provider or the other expert that we have used has competency, is objective, has exercised due professional care for assurance and consulting service, should have clear understanding of the scope, objectives, and the results of the work performed by the assurance and consulting services. And where reliance is placed on work of others, the CAE still remains accountable. So all that we have discussed in the SAE is part of the IIA standards also. So here, very good harmony between what IIA standards mention and what SIAs have mentioned with regard to the coordination and reliance of cooperation and reliance of the other auditors. So friends, that was my topic with regard to these two areas that we did today. Were using work of an expert and setting the objectives of the audit. We have a little time left for any questions that you might have on these two topics that I have covered.
Any questions, participants?
I think I have got one.
Yes, there is one question, sir.
You said internal auditor is responsible for his report, including the work of the expert incorporated in the report. Are there any circumstances where the expert can be held responsible instead of the internal auditor? So as far as the internal audit is concerned, the internal auditor is only responsible because as per the SIA, it is the internal auditor who must evaluate from all the stages, right? From appointment of the expert to what work he is going to do, how he is doing it, how he is arriving at any conclusions. All these places he has to participate in the work that is done. And if the auditor doesn't feel that these responses are matching with what he feels as an appropriate response, he must not attach that report or he must not include that report. He must look for either extended audit procedures or even look for another expert to be looked upon. So that is where the challenge is, that if he is part of the internal audit, then the expert cannot be held responsible in front of the company. You may have your internal arrangement with the expert for which you may hold him responsible. But when it comes to the board or when it comes to the audit committee, you cannot pass that here is the expert and I hired him, but I don't have any responsibility. Although in case where you feel that the management has hired the expert and he is not objective or he is not independent, better do not include his report in your internal audit report. You may want to have another expert, or you may want to put a disclaimer with regard to this aspect. I hope, Sandeep, I've cleared your point. All right, thanks, Sandeep.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, sir. I take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of Team WRC. I am very much thankful to CA Ashish Jaiswal for sharing his valuable time and most valuable knowledge and enlightening our participants on the topic like using the work of an expert and object of internal audit. Thank you very much, sir.
It was my pleasure. I just would also want to thank the participants for a very interesting participation. Although it was an online session, so we couldn't have face-to-face interaction. But here is my email ID and my phone number on the screen. Please back to me if you have any other questions. Feel free to get in touch with me on these topics that I have covered. And I wish you happy learning. And I wish you all become good internal auditors and we meet sometime in person. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So Anandji, I would be leaving now.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Jaiswal bhai,
Yes.
yes, please take over, sir.
Okay. Shall we, participants, shall we start with the second session? I think so. Our speaker has also joined. So I'd like to introduce our speaker for internal audit SIA 220, CA Kalpesh Panchal ji. He is a chartered accountant in practice since more than 12 years. I have met personally. I have attended sessions in Vapi and Mumbai as well. He is an excellent data analytics. He has excellent data analytics skills. A good forensic auditor as well. And he is a partner with NHI and Associates. So I hope your session today is more enjoyable. Over to you, Kalpesh sir.
Thank you, Dhaval, for your lovely introduction. First of all, I thank Rahul Parikh, Murtuza Kanchawala for providing this opportunity for this session. And I say one thing, that this is a very detailed, intensive course which designed by the WRC, which is maybe helpful not only for the fresher, but the person who has the experience in the internal audit, also refresh their knowledge. And I think it is very valuable session. I heard some part of the session of the Ashish Jaiswal sir, and I finding it is very, very useful. I will try my best to match their energy. Should I share my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a second. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Yeah. So the topic given is to me is the overall internal audit planning. Rather than I will say that the overall risk-based internal audit planning, because whatever currently we are doing, the audit planning is not just a planning, but it is a risk-based internal audit planning. And if you refer the SIA or IA standard, it is talk about the risk-based internal audit planning. So whenever I'm referring the audit planning, it means the risk-based internal audit planning. Of course, I have covered SIA 220, IA standard 2010, 2020, 2030, and 2040. Along with this, I have also referred the books published by the Institute based upon risk-based internal audit, and also the implementation guide published by the IIA, and the practicing guide issued by the IIA for the internal audit planning. So today what I'm covering is what is the challenge faced by the internal auditor in respect of the planning of the internal audit. And I will explain the various concepts, like what is a risk, what is a audit universe, what is a risk-based internal audit. Then we will go into deep into the what is a risk-based internal audit planning. Also, end of this session, I have designed the 5 MCQ so that participants can also test their knowledge, what they gain during this session. And let's make this session more interactive. I think there is no option to raise your voice, but you can at least type and raise the question, whatever query you have. I will try to answer all these queries at the end of the session. So why the risk-based internal audit? Why the strong and robust internal auditing and internal control system is required? We know that in last 10 to 15 years, there are lots of corporate scam is happening. And one of the things is come out that the internal auditor is lacking, or there is some deficiency in the audit system. There are lots of regulation also come out. If you refer the clause 49 of listing agreement, Companies Act 2013, also recently the RBI also make the mandatory risk-based internal audit for some of the entity. So it is a very important that we look at the internal audit planning from the risk-based perspective. And also, of course, the board of director from the corporate governance angle, they also want the assurance. Now, the value addition is one thing, consulting activity is one thing, and the assurance, whatever the control they have designed, whether those working correctly or not, whether they are addressing all the risks they are facing, those assurance board required. And this assurance you can provide only through risk-based internal audit planning. So if you go to the internal audit definition over the year, if you refer the definition given by IIA in 1947, it refers the appraisal of activity to provide the service to the management. There are some revision in 1981, but there is not much changes. But you refer the definition which revised in 1999, there are lots of changes. Now the internal audit activity divided into assurance and consultancy. And what they are saying to improve the effectiveness of the risk management, control and governance process. Now the objective is clear. The internal auditor need to provide the assurance, need to provide the consulting activity to improve the effectiveness of the risk management. Of course, the roles and responsibility of the risk management is with the management only, but as an internal auditor, he can provide the independent objective assurance to the management that whatever the control is designed is working properly, the risk mitigation process is there. If there is any deficiency, he can highlight. What the challenges currently we are facing? Everybody want to increase the efficiency, speed, and quality of the internal audit, right? But everybody want to reduce the cost. There is a mismatch in expectations. Every stakeholder have their own expectations, right? Management want that every auditable unit should be audited every quarter, right? Every risk needs to be checked, whether the standard is implemented or not. The size and complexity of the data is so much rise nowadays, it is practically impossible to do the justice to the volume of the data which is generated by the current system. Assume the Flipkart and Amazon and all those company which is generating lakhs of invoices every day. Is it possible that you can verify each and every transactions through the transaction auditing method? Answer is no. Then what we need to do? There should be a way out to increase our efficiency, speed, and how to reduce the cost of the overall internal audit activity. This is just not applicable to the CF firm, but this is applicable to in-house internal auditor also, right? Because the resources are square limited, right? And we have to use those resources in a best effective manner. So currently, what is the auditor's dilemma is how much to audit, how to use the resources, what to audit, right? How depth we do the audit. All those question answer we will find out in these sessions. Now understand what is the risk. As per the II definition, the possibility of an event occurring that could have an impact on achievement of the objective is a risk. Okay, and as per the ISO, the effect of the uncertainty on the objective. So every business activity I tell you, there is a some or other risk is involved. Okay, without risk, there is no business. But business want to mitigate the risk by implementing some control. So what is the inherent risk? Inherent risk is without any control. I give you one example. Let's say you have the inventory of, let's say, 100 crores, but you have not taken any insurance. So the risk is 100 crores, right? If anything happened, fire breakout, there is a loss of 100 crore is possible, right? Of course, the probability factor is there. There is a not a sure that fire will break out this year or next year, right? But let's say you have taken the insurance, right? Or you have, there are lots of safety related, you have training is given, there are fire hydrants is there, your facility is a fireproof or something like that. You have implemented so much of controls, even though there are some risks still there, which is called a residual risk. Okay. Now, what to do with the residual risk? So management have 4 options. Number 1, to accept the risk. Second is reduce the risk. Third is transfer the risk. And fourth is avoid the risk. I give you the example of each of these 4. Accept the risk, means do nothing except, yes, we have, let's say, cashier is holding 50,000 cash on daily basis. So 50,000 is the risk. And reduce the risk. Let's change the limit of the cash holding to 10,000. So now your risk is reduced from 50,000 to 10,000. Third is transfer the risk. Take the bulgari insurance, cash in transit insurance, and transfer your risk to insurance company by paying the insurance premium. And for these, avoid no cash transaction. So there is no cash, no risk. Okay. So if you find any process, just check what is the inherent risk, what are the control in place, what residual risk remain, and what management is doing. This is applicable for each and every process and activity. If you understand this concept, I think you will understand the internal audit properly. But you are not just think about the residual risk. First, you should check what is the inherent risk. Now, what is the audit universe? This is very important. So I give you the example. You can say the audit universe is a, let's say a company have a 10 plant, means 10 auditable units. One can say there is a 5 different department. Okay, there is a sales, there is a marketing, procurement, inventory, HR, accounts. There is a 5 department, means 5 auditable unit. Okay. And there is a possibility that there is a companies have 3 line of business. So 3 is a business unit, is a auditable unit. But you have to combine all these together and prepare a matrix before you planning for the preparing the audit plan, internal audit plan. Okay, this become your audit universe. So starting of the year, you should know which are my audit universe. Prepare the list, how many location, which function, which business, how many legal entity they have. There are many times what happened, there are lots of things are outsourced. Let's say payroll process is outsourced. There are job workers. There are many important process companies outsourcing. You include that into the audit universe. I'll give you some example, like in most of the real estate company, what happened that when you come up with a new project, they create a new entity. I have one client where there is a 15 clients audit we are doing. but we are identifying only 4 auditable units, like 4 division only, because they are all 15 company using same software. At a stage, you can download all the data combined together, and they are following the same SOP, the same process owner, same HOD. Okay, so you need to understand how the company look at it. You refer to the MIS of the company, how they reporting to the management, whether it is a entity wise, whether it is a business wise, whether it is a department wise, whether it is a brand wise, whether it is a region wise, how they are looking at their operation, their structure. This is the best way to find your audit universe. Otherwise, there is a problem when you prepare the audit report and there is a, let's say, you are preparing the observation of, let's say, for simple example, I give you the open PO. Okay. There is a 5 division data combined together. You have prepared one annexer and only 1 point, but there is a 5 HODs are responsible to answer that one particular observation. If you are aware about this, you can at least do one thing. You can provide the summary in the annexers or some identifiable column so that they can distinguish their department related instances. Otherwise, it becomes the re-audit or rework you have to do. What information you can consider while preparing the audit universe? How the organization, what is the strategy, what is the value chain? What is the major area or unit department there? I already talked about the third party or outsourced vendor. What type of IT application they are using? What is the regulatory and legal compliance requirement they have? Like, let's say you are doing the internal audit of, let's say, NBFC. Okay, so maybe the compliance department become the one auditable unit because they are doing all the compliance related filing to the RBI and other statutory authority. Okay, so if there is a particular requirement of a stringent requirement or one specific specialized requirement relating to any statute, then you have to look at or include that part of it in your auditable unit. And of course, the non-financial performance indicator like health and safety and environment related also you need to consider. This is a step you should follow while preparing the audit list of the auditable unit. You first discuss with the management, prepare the complete risk based upon whatever you discuss as per your understanding, assess the objective of each and every auditable unit, and again revalidate with the management, and then you can use auditable unit to draw your internal audit plan. In my each and every slide, there is a source is given. If you want to refer to further in detail, you can go to that source. These are all publicly available documents. This is one of the illustrative list of the audit universe. Let's say there is a department and this is the locations. So in all the locations, there is a compliance department. And there is a, let's say in the factory, only the maintenance related activities going on. So these are the two other unit identify. And HR is there only in the head office. Okay, the production is going on into factory only. And procurement function is happening in head office as well as central warehouse and factory also. This is a way you have to prepare a metric so that you know how many auditable unit you have. This become your audit universe. This is not a internal audit plan. This is just a audit universe. Now, what is a risk-based internal audit? It is a internal methodology which is primarily focused on the inherent risk involved in the activity or system and provide the assurance. Earlier, I have mentioned that you should not focus just only residual risk, but the inherent risk. Okay. Previously, what is happening, whatever control they have, let's say they have maker checker control. We are just verifying whether the maker checker control is there or not. Like 3% is signing a voucher or not, right? This is a traditional audit, right? Now, what is risk-based internal audit? You have to provide the assurance, the effectiveness of risk management. So you have to check each and every activity and find out the what type of risk involved, how much risk involved. And based upon that, you correlate the control which implemented by the management and then come out the what is a residual risk. Okay. What is the advantage of the risk-based internal audit? It is you understand the what is the risk appetite of the management, and accordingly you can draw the risk-based internal audit plan. There is no inherent risk within the risk appetite. Whether the residual risks are not in line with the risk appetite, action is being taken to overcome. Let's say there is a policy of the company that we will not keep any cash above 5,000 or 1 lakhs in any of our branch. Okay. This is a risk appetite company have. 1 lakh is a risk appetite. But you find that there is actually it is keeping more than 1 lakh, the residual risk will increase, right? The risk management process, including the effectiveness of the response and completion of the action, are being monitored by management to ensure they continue to operate effectively. Risk, response, and action are being properly classified and reported. Now we come out then what the process defined for the risk-based internal audit planning. So this is in practice guide. This is a process defined, but there is a possibility that one step is overlap with the other, or one step is performed earlier than other. There is a possibility, though there is not a laid down any standard process that you have to follow this step only. So, but these are the bare minimum things you have to follow. So number one is to understand the organizations. So before planning, let's say I give you one example, like one new assignment you are getting, there is a new client. Now for the new client, how you prepare the audit plan? So first you have to understand the organizations, but how to understand the organizations? So there is a lots of informations are available in the public domains. You can use those information, like the audit report is available. There is a company's website is there. So lots of information are available there also. If it is a public limited company, there are lots of investment presentations made by the company. You will find lots of insight into those presentations, because it is not just talk about what happened, but what is the plan they are looking at in next year or in long term. So whatever information available in the public domain, you can use the fullest extent to understand the organizations. Okay. So this is a publicly available information, but let's say if you are doing the audit of private limited company, where there is no much information available in the public domain. So what my suggestion is, you should visit their office, their factory, and spend some time to understand their processes, their system, right? Let's say you are, if the company is a manufacturing company, you should visit that plant and understand the production process. Okay, how many workers are working over there, whether the production process is outsourced, how many different sub-plant they have, what type of material they are using, what type of health and safety related precaution they are taking, whether they are proper SOPs there or not, which software they are using. All those information will help you to better prepare your audit plan. So this we have already discussed that what is the document and all things available in the public domain. You can refer, or the organization chart also you can refer, so that you can understand who is reporting to whom, how many departments they have, what is the hierarchy they have, and of course if it is possible, you can discuss with the board of director, management, and HODs. I tell you, it is very helpful so that you can prepare the plan which is more effective. Then come the risk identification. Okay. So auditor should carry out the independent risk assessment of all auditable units. We have referred the audit universe. Now you have prepared the auditable units. Now you have to identify the risk. You have to do the risk assessment, and then prioritizations. I give you the simple example. Let's say there is a 5 plant and you need to do an audit of 5 plant in, let's say, next 3 years. Which plant's audit you will do the first? This question answer you will find in this risk assessment process, risk prioritizations. If you see that, for example, the one plant is using the SAP or some other good software, and one plant is not using that software, one plant is have the proper ISO manual and SOP in place, other plant do not have that in place, or there is a separate department using separate ERP system, it is not interrelated. All those things you will, if you check in advance, it will help in the risk assessment process and prioritize the which auditable unit you have to focus. As I said, you should check the SOP and ISO manual, or what type of software they have implemented. It will help to identify the maturity of the organization's risk management process, whether they have the risk register, whether they are doing first time internal audit, or they have internal audit risk internal audit process that's in many years, whether the result of a risk assessment done by the management, or there is no process to do the risk assessment. The request made by the senior management and reliance on work of the other. Of course, sometimes what happened, the senior management give the request that you should focus on these things in detail. Let's say they have recently changed the accounting software from one particular ERP to some other ERP like SAP. So they requested you that please check whether all the data which is there in the old system, or the master in the old system, whether properly move to the new system or not. Maybe this is not maybe the part of your auditable unit, but if there is a request from the senior management, and if there is a resource available, you should take this request and include in your plan. How to identify the various type of risk? So one simple method you can do is one is a auditable unit. Then you can categorize the various type of risk, like here what I have mentioned, or you can simply give the financial risk, operational risk, and regulatory risk. These 3 type of risk only, and you can give some ranking. Okay, so there is a one plant. Okay, so whether there is any financial risk, whether there is any operational risk, whether any regulatory risk. Okay, these 3 criteria you are using to find out what type of risk one particular auditable unit is facing. And you can prepare the all list of these type of risk for all the auditable unit, and you should prepare you can use this type of impact of the risk. Let's say you can use 1 for the insignificant, 2 for the moderate, 5 for the major, and 5 for the critical. And the likelihood, like we using the heat map to categorize our observation, like low, medium, and high. The same way you can use the heat map to find out the impact of the risk and likelihood and to generate the risk score for the area. So for each and every auditable unit, you should find out what is the risk score. And based upon the risk score, you can prioritize, you can provide the priority, which unit you should audit first, which unit you should first do the audit later on. What is the frequency, whether every year the audit required, or it is twice in 3 years, or every quarter, or once in 3 years is sufficient. Now, this is a very important, allocate the resources. As we discussed earlier, that the resources are scarce, limited, okay, and we have to use those resources effectively, efficiently, and economically. And at the same time, we should fulfill the obligation to complete the assignment properly, correct? So how we can balance out this? So now you have all your auditable unit. We have generated the risk score. You know the frequency, okay? Now, based upon this, you can estimate the resource requirement in advance, okay? And find out how many resources or internal staff currently you have. Let's say based upon your assessment, let's say 5% required throughout the year to do the audit of one particular entity, okay? But currently you have only 4 resources. So the question arises, you need to hire 1 resources more to complete the audit plan which you have created. Second thing, you have the resources, but there is a required expertise is missing. Let's say one particular auditable unit required the SAP knowledge, but your staff do not have the SAP knowledge. You can train those staff and prepare those staff so that he can do the audit of that particular unit. There is a possibility that you can say that there are a requirement to do the, let's say, IT audit, but you do not have any staff where they have the expertise to do the IT audit or system audit. In that case, what you will do? You can outsource the complete those assignment, right? You can request the management that this type of resources we do not have, we must outsource this, right? So all those factors you need to consider during the resource allocations. So as I mentioned earlier, you have to estimate this, right? And one thing is very important, when you are estimating the resources, the availability hours of your existing staff, you should reduce the unproductive days like public holidays, the privileged leave, or any casual leave or whatever leave allowed by the organizations, the training time, right? All those time you should reduce, okay? So let's say you have the 10 staff, you are working 5 days in a week, So maybe approximately 200 days you have, okay? And you are allowing maybe 20 days of leave. Now the 180 days only remain. You are working for 8 hours, okay? So, and of course, those contingency, you also need to consider that there is a possibility that the staff falls sick, okay? All those things also need to consider and find out the where is a gap. In case of there is a short resources, okay, you should outsource or co-source the audit also and hire a new additional staff also. But though for that, the approval of the management is required. This we have already discussed the number of internal audit staff and productivity hours, the knowledge, skill, and other competencies of the internal staff. The fund available for training and technology, and available auditable unit. All those things is very important for the resource management. There is a, I tell you the practical example where we are facing the challenges. Let's say you are planning the assignment on, let's say, 1st May or 1st June. But the HOD is telling you that during the 1st to 10th, we are all busy in the MIS. We are not available for the audit. If you know those things in the advance, you can save those time, okay? You can plan some other activity like training or some other things. And you should not start the audit when the audit is not available, then the effective utilization of resources will not happen. You should check the what is the appropriate time when you should commence the audit, okay? And there is a lots of time it also happened that there is suddenly some changes happen in the organizations. Some HODs left the organization or some employee left the organizations, or you have started the audit, but the process owner is going on leave. All those things you should keep in mind while resource management and keep your audit plan flexible, dynamic, and do not surprise for any surprise, I tell you. As a chartered accountant firm, we are facing lots of challenges. And this type of issue arise on daily basis, but we should find out some alternative, okay? And we should ensure that our resources are properly utilized. Whenever there is they are not doing the audit, they should provide their time for the training and they improve their skill set. There is a possibility that one staff have some knowledge, he can share with the other staff. Let's say in my office, one person is a good in SAP, he is a good, other person is good in Excel. They do the presentation and train the other staff so that the skill set is get improved. Okay. And when the skill set get the improved, your work, whatever the work you can assign, you can find that those will completed in lesser number of hours and you can save the lots of time. So you can use the time gap between the two assignment or whenever the assignment get cancelled or when there is a time that the person is not doing any audit. So what are the points you need to consider while drafting the internal audit? The list of the proposed audit engagement specify whether the same is assurance or consulting. I know there is a separate session taken by the speaker on the what is the assurance and consulting assignment. So I'm not going into detail, but the proposal should speak out clearly whether it is a assurance or consulting in nature. Okay. What is the objective of the assignment? Rationale for selecting each proposed engagement. Like I have mentioned earlier, you are preparing the auditable list of the auditable units, doing the risk assessment, deriving the risk score, right? This is your document which become why you have selected this particular unit to do the audit for every quarter or every year, or one particular unit for once in a 3 years only, or once in a out of 4 quarter only in 1 quarter. So these are the other rationale you need to capture, which will help to understand the management, the board of directors, the audit committee, to understand what rationale is there for the preparation of this internal audit plan. You should jot down the objective and scope of each and every proposed engagement, the frequency, periodicity of the engagement, whether quarterly, yearly, half yearly. You need to jot down those in your internal audit plan. Risk to be addressing each engagement. So which risk you are going to address? If you are not checking the IT related risk or cybersecurity related risk, you should mention that this risk we are not addressing, right? So that the management or board of the director is aware about that, or audit committee is aware about that, that the objective of the assignment is not that to address this risk. There is a, you need to mention a reason also, whether this is due to the lack of resources or competency. What are the reason why we are not addressing those risks? Now they have to take a call whether it needs to outsource or whether any additional resources they need to hire to complete data to address that particular risk. Okay. You need to discuss with the process owner, have all the risk and auditable unit have been considered exhaustively? Are there any upcoming changes which are not being addressed? This is very important. You are preparing the risk audit report based upon what current situations. But what happened in between the audit period? Some changes is happening. Let's say there is a changes in the accounting software, or operational software, or ERP. There is a new plant is maybe coming up. There is a lots of capex is there. Let's say there is a acquisition of the new company or new unit, or selling of the new existing unit. All those changes, are you considering whether you are aware about that? Because if you are not aware about those type of changes in advance, it is very difficult for you to consider those in later on in your planning. You should keep some room, some flexibility, some margin in when you are calculating the resource requirement, and consider that 10 to 15% for the contingency, so that if there is any changes is happening, you can provide more resources and complete those tasks. Okay. How do the engagement link to the objective and top risk? As an auditor, maybe you are finding that this is a risk, but when you are discussing with the management, their thought process is completely maybe different. You are finding that there is a risk of, let's say, they are not taking the, I give you the practical example. Let's say company dealing in iron ore or steel, and they are not taking the fire insurance. Okay. Or let's say, for example, the telecom company. Let's say they are not taking the insurance of their mobile tower. There is a more than 1 lakh location where the mobile tower is installed. Do you find that in one day there is in more than one location there is a fire or something happened? So you understand the management perspective, the rationale right? The risk appetite they have. If you understand those rationale, you will this will help in your risk assessment better, right? And it will help to prepare your audit plan more effective and utilize your resources more productive. And how do the engagement add value to the organizations? I tell you, in my case, I always ask whenever we start the audit, whenever we prepare the audit program, we always ask to the management, what value addition you want, whether there is any pain point or any issue which you think we should take care. You should ask those type of questions whenever you are starting the assignment. Any request of the senior manager which are not been considered, as I said earlier, if you are not considering any request, please mention the reason why it is not considered. Keep them well informed. Communicate the final plan for approval. As per the IA standard, the chief audit executive must communicate the internal audit plan and resource requirement, including significant interim changes to senior management and board for review and the approval. This is a requirement stated in the IA standard. The CA must clearly state the risk which cannot be addressed due to resource limitations. This is very important. So if you are not addressing any risk, you are aware about that, you should clearly state that this is a risk, this list of the risk we are not addressing during this assignment. Assess risk continuously and update the plan. This is very important. It is not that during the starting of the assignment, you have done the risk assessment, but during the assignment, you will not do any changes, right? In today's environment, where there is a changes happening in now and then, every day there is situation is changing. I give you the practical example, like 28th March 2020, what happened? Suddenly lockdown happened due to COVID, right? Whether you have to update the audit plan or not, of course required. Updation is required. You have planned the physical meeting, but it is now not possible, right? There is a physical verification process you have planned, but it is not possible, right? Yeah, you can do the video call, or maybe you can use some technology and maybe somehow you can complete that, but there are some changes is required in existing plan. Correct. There is a lots of changes happening in regulatory front also, like recent changes happened in GST. There are lots of changes maybe come into effect from the 18th July. There are lots of changes in GST rate also. There are in between maybe rate changes in TDS rate. So all those changes happening, you need to change your plan also. Whether it is a regulatory change, whether there is a change in risk. Let's say, for example, company is selling goods to Ukraine or Russia, or company is dealing in petrochemicals. Do you understand? In last 2 to 3 months, due to this Russian-Ukraine war is going on, the risk is increased, right? So whenever there is a new development happened, any development which affect to the operation of the company, the objective of the organization, you should update your internal audit plan. And whatever significant changes, if you are making, you should approve those plans from the management. And the whatever changes is there, you should provide the reason. And there should be a formal communication with respect to that to the management. This is a illustrative plan, risk-based internal audit plan, where there is a department is there is a process is there is a business location. This is a risk assessment you have done. So initial risk is 4, control environment risk is 4. So the risk rate, the risk score derived is 16. So where there is a high risk score, you are covering every year. Where is a low risk score, you are covering twice or once in 3 years. This is the way you can prepare your risk-based plan. This is a template available. So few practical tips I give you for the risk-based internal audit plan. Number one, the industry knowledge is very important. Every industry is a different. So let's say if you are doing the audit of NBFC or stockbroker or insurance, which are highly regulatory industry. There are lots of compliance requirement. There is a penalty for non-compliance, very high penalty, right? So you need to consider those aspects when you are doing the planning. Second thing, of course, 80-20 ratio is applicable in everywhere. How you can use your 20% of resources to cover the 80% of the risk, right? So this is, let's say, you are doing just for, I give you the one practical example, you are doing the vouching, let's say 1,000 invoices, you can cover only 20%, like 200 only, which include the 80% value of the total number of the invoice. So by covering only 20 invoice, you are covering the risk relating to 80% value of the invoices. The same principle you can apply when you are doing, let's say, branch audit. There are 50 branches company have. Okay, is it possible that you can do the audit of only 10 or 15 branch? If you do some inquiry, you do some data analytics, you understand what type of software they are using, whether there is a SOP there or not, you can certainly find out which are the top 15 branch which you should audit first. You can use the criteria of which branch making high turnover, where there is a changes in the high frequency in changing of the employee, where there is a manual control, where there is no system-based control. All those factors you can consider, and you can, I think, reasonably you can find out that there is a 10 to 15 branch which are very important out of 50. And this type of judgment, of course, you take from your experience. You have earlier, you have, let's say, done the audit of 50 branches, and you aware about what type of observation you get, right? I'm not saying you just rely blindly on those evaluations, but you now have some experience of those branches, right? So you can use those judgment and reduce the number of visits, or you can do the remote audit also. Let's say they are using the same system or ERP and it is available at one locations, you can download all the data of the 50 branches, right? And do the data crunching, and then you can see whether you need to visit those branches or not. or do the actual audit or not, right? And there is a audit tools, of course, you can use, you can do the walkthrough, flowchart you can use. Focus on the new development. We have already discussed in detail. Keep in touch with the management. This is very important. How to keep in touch with the management? I actually do one thing. There is a, in Google, if you set the alert for one particular company, you will get email based upon whatever frequency you have set on every day, once in a week. So whatever, if there is any news relating to that particular company, Google will generate automatically alert for you. For me, this helped me to whatever changes is happening in one particular organization or entity, and I keep the tab on the what changes is there, what the news come out. Okay. But there is a possibility that everything you will not know from the news, or there is a possibility that it is not possible that everything is reported. So once in a while, you should visit the management, discuss with the management, refer to the, as I said earlier, the presentation which they are making to the investors, where they are providing in detail what the planning for the next couple of years, right? All those things will help you to understand their business better, to visualize what is coming in the next year. If there is a risk, RCM is there, risk control matrix is there, you can certainly use those RCM and find out the what type of the risk company is facing, what control is there, right? Whether controls are automated control or manual control. All those things you can help to plan the risk-based internal audit. I think now it is time to test your knowledge. I think everybody ready for the MCQ. I have prepared 5 MCQ, and I have tried to make as simple as possible, and there is no negative marking. So everybody, please participate. You provide your answer in chat. So this is the first question. The overall internal audit plan shall be reviewed and approved by whom? I will wait for at least 1 minute so that everybody answer in chat box. I have not seen, yeah. 2% answer. Everybody should try. Good. Wow. Lots of person are answering. We have good audience. So we have 36 attendees. Out of that, I think 7 to 8% answered. I request that the participant also please answer. It is fine if the answer is wrong. At least you can try. Should I reveal the answer? So most of Attendee saying the answer is A, somebody saying is D. Let's see whether it is A or D. So it is D. So as per para 3.2 of the SIA 220, the overall internal audit plan shall be reviewed and approved by the highest governing body responsible for internal audit, normally the board of director or the audit committee. Are you ready for next question? An audit universe shall be prepared after establishing the scope of overall internal audit plan, during the execution of internal audit assignment, prior to establishing the scope of the overall internal audit plan, or D, after the completion of internal audit assignment. So we got to answer. So still now 5% answer. Other participants also try. Palak, Anil, Arpana, Arth, Aswin, Atul, Bharat, Lalit, Dipti, Hardik, Jayant, Kairas, Kamlesh, Lalit Kumar, Mahesh, Manisha. Manisha, I think I've already answered. Nilesh Gandhi, Pallavi, Payal. So most of participants are saying the answer is C. Let's see what is the answer. Yes, it is C. We have a very intelligent audience. So as per para 4.4 of SIA 220, prior to define the scope of the audit, complete identification of all the auditable unit of the organization should be made. Let's move to question number 3. To develop the risk-based internal audit plan, the chief audit executive consult with senior management and board and obtain an understanding of whether A, organization strategies, B, key business objectives, C, associated risk and risk management process, or D, all of the above. We got 3 answers till now. For come on, all the participants, please answer. Rajesh is answering all the question answers. So most of the participants are saying it is a D, all of the above. Let's see what is the answer. Yes, it is a D. As per the International Standard on Internal Audit 2010 planning, to develop the risk-based plan, the Chief Audit Executive consult with the senior management and the board and obtain the understanding of the organization strategy, key business objective, associated risk, and risk management processes. We move to question number 4. It is the second last question. So question is, the Chief Audit Executive must communicate the internal audit activities plan and resource requirement, including significant interim changes to A, Chief Financial Officer and Company Secretary, B, Senior Management and the Board of the Directors, C, Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer, or D, Company Secretary and Statutory Auditor. Rajesh answer first. There's a competition between Rajesh, Sandeep, and Pallavi. Come on, this is the second last question. Now only one question is left. So most of the participant answered is B, Senior Management and the Board of the Director. Yes, it is correct. As per Standard 2020 Communication and Approval, the Chief Audit Executive must communicate the internal audit activities plan and resource requirement, including significant interim changes to senior management and the Board of Directors for approval. The Chief Audit Executive must also communicate the impact of the resource limitation to them. Now, this is the last question. To achieve the objective of approved internal audit plan, the Chief Audit Executive must ensure that internal audit resources are A, appropriate, B, sufficient, C, effectively deployed, or D, all of the above. Come on, all participants can answer the question. This is the last chance. All the participants who answered, their answer is same. It is a D, all of the above. And it is correct. The chief audit executive must ensure that the internal audit resources are appropriate, sufficient, and effectively deployed to achieve the approved plan. So lots of resources which I have used, I think it is very important. You can refer those resources for more guidance. If you do not understand anything, this recording going to be uploaded on the institute website. You can refer the recording also. Those are all the resources which I have used are publicly available. You can go through those resources. I understand the person who is a fresher or do not have much experience in internal audit may require some time. So you just go through and refer those resources so you will get the better understanding. If anybody have any question, we have some times, I can answer those questions.
Participants, if you have any questions, then please ask. We still have some time.
There are some questions on chat box.
Okay, I'll just go through that, sir. Sir, the chat box isn't shared to me, I think so. The questions in chat box are directly to you.
Yes. I let me refer over one by one question.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, so one participant asking that how do we perform the audit on sales and purchase for Flipkart, where there are lakhs of invoice produced in a day? Yeah, this is very interesting question. So if there are lakhs of transaction, right? Technically, it is difficult to do the vouching. Even you will not get the physical copy of those invoice. Even though if you get the soft copy of the invoice, 1 lakh invoices per day for 365 days, right? They are working 365 days. So you can imagine there are 3 crore and 65 lakhs of the invoices. Okay. I think your laptop capacity will not that much that we open those type of invoices, this type of files. So here the data analytics will help. Okay. You should download the sales register, purchase register, okay, and do the data analysis. Okay. They are not physically approving the invoices. Okay. So you can do the data analytics. If let's say you are doing a review of the sales, okay, there are lots of software available like Idea and other software which handle this type of the large data. Even the Excel also at least handle 10 lakhs of the row, but if you load 10 lakhs of the data in Excel, it become 100 to 200 MB file and it is difficult to open. So in that scenario, there is a one only option remain is to use the data analytics skill and use the specialized tools. There is no other option is available. Okay, so you use the Idea or any other software so that it can upload those volume of the data and do the various analysis. And there is a inbuilt, there is a various task is already defined in the Idea. When you upload the file, right, it gives that this serial number is missing. There is a mismatch between this vendor code, or there are one particular vendor having different addresses, right? All those analysis or anomalies, whatever there in the file, this data analytics will throw out in within a fraction of second. So only the data analytics you can do, the vouching is not possible. Let me move to next question. This has been answered live. This has been answered.
So the other questions were, I suppose, those answers to your MCQ questions. They had replied it in question and
Okay,
answer.
okay.
Okay, sir, there are one more question.
Yes.
What should be the size of the IA team of a visiting team to project site having 7 departments and rupees 1,500 crores of turnover and more than 70,000 transactions?
So it is before the your formulation of the internal audit plan, right?
Probably yes, sir.
Okay. Even the only one single person visit the plant or facility, it is just sufficient. Okay. I tell you my recent example where we have been called for to provide the quotation for the one of the internal assignment. The company is manufacturing into the plastic industry. So what we have done the half-day visit to the factory, and we understand what is the manufacturing process they are following, what type of inventory they have, what software they are using. We spent the couple of hours with the HODs, and we understand the prima facie what process they are following, what type of structure they have, right? So that there is a whatever I'm now suggesting in my internal plan, it is based upon the what practically I have seen and visited and discussed. It is not something which I am out of my imaginations, right? So based upon that, we have prepared the audit plan which is accepted by the management.
Okay. As rightly said, sir, now in case of internal audit, you need to think like a businessman rather than as an auditor.
Correct. So two things, sometimes the businessmen have risk appetite is different, but you should not equivalent yourself with a businessman. Your duty is your duty is to report whether the whatever the risk mechanism is there, whether the control is there or not, whether it is functioning properly or not. You should not think like a businessman, but you are the internal auditor. You have a duty. You are an independent person. You should not kept your shoes in the businessman's shoes. Okay. So my suggestion is, of course, to understand the business, of course, you think from the business angle.
Exactly.
To understand the nuances of the business, you please think from the business perspective, right? I tell you the example, like the builders or real estate developer, they have very high risk appetite,
Yes.
right? Many times they small regulatory compliance they have ignored.
Definitely, yes.
Correct. But if you refer to the some NBFC or banks or insurance company, right, they have separate compliance department. Even the 1 day delay is a very critical for them,
Exactly, yes.
right? The non-compliance is linked to their KRA sometimes. So it is a definitely you should think like a businessman, but to understand the business only.
Process, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Anybody have any question? I think there is two more question.
No, sir, those are the responses. Means
Response.
okay. Response for the question.
Okay.
They are asking it on the question answer tab. Participants, any more questions? See, everyone is done, I think so.
Okay.
So I'll move forward to the formal vote of thanks to Kalpesh, sir. Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful session, and I suppose all the entire participants involved have understood and okay, so one minute. There's a question. Okay, they are replying it on the question and answer tab. Okay, so it was a wonderful session by Kalpesh, sir. And you can, if you want some data analytics, you can definitely contact him and you can follow him. He has very great and good data analytics skills. Apart from, he is the core of internal audit at NHI and Associates. So thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful session. Thank you so much once again from WIRC.
Thank you, Dhaval, and thank you, WRC, for inviting me. It is just such a wonderful session, and our audience is very interactive. They have participated in this MCQ. It is, I think, it will help them in their future assignment. And if they have any query, I have given my email ID at the end of my presentation. Of course, you are going to say the presentation also, right? They can write.
Yes.
Or they can follow me on the LinkedIn also. Or if you have any doubt, any question or query, you can definitely email me, Instant or LinkedIn, or email me. I will love to answer them. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.